to get enlightened by the good doctor in just a few seconds. My name is Abdul Qadir Mohammed Suleiman from OSH Pro Services, and as mentioned earlier, we hold these webinars to create a platform where we can discuss on issues and get enlightened. I once talked to some high-level officials from different employers' organizations, and their focus was very much on compliance with the regulation and full stop. So what they said was that their members they want their members to comply with the regulations, but is it enough? Is complying with regulation enough, or we have to do more to ensure that we have a good practice? So this is what Dr. Muruka is going to enlighten us today. And as usual, we'll take the questions at the end of the presentation. So the good doctor will present for half an hour or so, and then we'll take questions. You can write your questions in the chat box, or you can raise your hand if you prefer to talk, and we'll unmute you, and we'll have the discussions going. So Dr. Muruka, welcome, and thank you for your time, for being with us this evening, and we are looking forward to hearing your presentation and getting enlightened.
Thank you very much, Abdul Qadir. I am glad to be here. I feel really honored to make this presentation. And as you have correctly put it, my presentation will compliance with occupational safety and health regulatory decision making. I am just waiting for Imran to allow me to share my screen shortly. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So the topic I'm going to discuss with listeners today is on compliance with occupational safety and health regulatory requirements and the decision making. Many of you will recall that compliance was driven by magistrates and priests a long time ago during the development of the regulatory regimes of many countries, including the development of new laws in different parts of the world. As history put it, compliance was necessary because workplaces were unable to put in place safety and health measures that could guarantee better occupational safety and health for workers, reduce losses, and ensure that productivity could be enhanced. So governments decided to now put in place regulatory regimes to address that particular gap. So in this presentation, I would like to ask a few questions that we will try to answer before the end of the presentation. Number one is that what is the role and significance of regulatory compliance with the improvement of workers' safety and health? And then the second question is on, does regulatory requirements impact on occupational safety and health decision making? And the number four question is, what is the relationship between regulatory requirements and compliance? And finally, the last question is, and which we might not have an answer until the end of the presentation, is, are regulatory requirements sustainable in creating safe workplaces and promoting the health of workers. So the definitions that we need to be clear about from the onset are three mainly. We need to be clear on statutory and regulatory requirements as number one. Number two, we need to understand the definition of decision making. And finally, we need to understand the definition of compliance. So with respect to statutory and regulatory requirements, this term has, or this phrase rather, has two important terminologies. Number one is statutory requirements, and number two is regulatory requirements. I want to combine these, but we know that statutory requirements refers to laws passed by a state or a central government, while regulatory requirements refers to rules issued by a regulatory body or by a state or central government. So they are different, but highly interrelated terminology. The acts and the laws that govern operations of workplaces fall under statutory requirements. Issues to do with codes of practice, for example, in our Republic, Kenya, codes of practice, advisories, those fall within the ambit of regulatory requirements. Of course, we can also say that the recent COVID return to work requirements fall within regulatory requirements as issued by the Directorate of Occupational Safety and Health Services. Now, what can organizations do in terms of complying with the regulatory requirements? So there are a number of things that organizations can do to ensure that they comply with the regulatory requirements. Number one, they must have a kind of a methodology in place. And that methodology must address 4 specific areas. Number one is for determining, maintaining, and updating all applicable statutory and regulatory requirements. So for a workplace to be able to comply to regulatory requirements, it has to have updated sources, updated lists, and updated copies or information about statutory and regulatory requirements. Number two, it has to have a method for communicating all applicable statutory and regulatory requirements within the organization. In some places, you find that legislation has been updated, but this has not been well communicated to members of the organization. And so you find that some members of the organization lag behind with respect to information about updated legislation or statutory requirements. Number three, there must be a methodology to ensure that the organization can be able to identify specific statutory and regulatory requirements and input these into all their processes, and especially where the regulatory requirements apply within departments, within sections, or within units of the organization, so that everyone who is affected by these statutory and regulatory requirements is aware of what needs to be done at what stage of the process in the activities. And on a regular basis, the organization should develop a system for monitoring process outputs for compliance with statutory and regulatory requirements. And these process outputs, for example, would include a safety and health audit report in our case. Now, the next definition that I want us to talk about is decision making. And this is a process in which decision making is a process in which an individual, group, or organization reaches conclusions about future actions to pursue a given set of objectives and limits on available resources. According to Russo 2014, it is a process in which we reach conclusions. And for us to reach conclusions, there is normally a huge process that we need to take. We can see that, let me just share this. Yeah, so we can see what Russo considers to be the phases of the decision-making process here. And the first part of the decision-making process, phase, is to frame the issues that require decisions to be made about, and then gather intelligence that particular issue. And of course, one will reach certain conclusions. And based on those conclusions, of course, there is a learning process that takes place. And this so-called deciding how to decide, or the meta-decision process, according to Russo, is effective in identifying and framing the issues that require decisions. Indeed, the first important action that needs to be taken is to decide on what to decide about. And that is what we call the framing the issues. Now, effective decision-making process is a 7-step process, in which case the first thing that needs to be done is to identify the decisions to be done. And this is decision on what to decide on. And the second step is to gather information. And once information is gathered, we identify alternatives. And number 4 step is to weigh the evidence that is available. And number 5 step is to choose among alternatives. And once you have chosen that alternative, you take action. And based on the continuous improvement process, you will be able to review your decision on a continuous basis. I now go to the issue of compliance, and this is a state of accordance between an actor's behavior or products on the one side and defined explicit rules, procedures, conventions, standards, guidelines, principles, legislation, or other norms that one is required to comply with. In simple terms, compliance simply refers to obeying the rules and the commands that are available. And there are different types and levels of prescriptive requirements that oblige those who are subsidiary to comply with. And one area is the international laws on occupational safety and health, international standards on occupational safety and health. And also we have domestic laws and regulations. On the international front, for example, we have international standards prescribed by the International Labour Organization. The recommendations, the conventions are critical in this particular area. Domestically, around Kenya, we have the Occupational Safety and Health Act and its subsidiary legislation. And of course, we have the Work Injury Benefits Act with respect to work injury compensation. The other level of compliance or prescriptive compliance has to do with industry-wide standards. I know Kenya Association of Manufacturers, the FKE, have come up with standards that members need to comply with to ensure that they continue to retain their membership within the organization. We also have industry best practices, and there are certain companies that we have around Kenya that comply with industry best practices. This could be worldwide, countrywide, or even regional in terms of membership. Many organizations also have organizational rules and procedures, safe operating procedures, standard operating procedures, and so on. Of course, we also have enterprise architecture principles and models. There are specific enterprises that thrive on high standards of safety and health because of the nature of the type of work activities that are conducted. For example, those who work at height, maybe at great height, have higher standards for safe work at height. Those who work with electrical systems have very high architecture principles for working with electricity. And this compliance with this particular kind of principles and models enhance the level of compliance with safety and health. I now want to turn to systems that facilitate compliance. And one of the systems that has been identified to augment and facilitate compliance with different types of requirements is the Occupational Safety and Health Management System, OSH-MS. And this is usually, in most cases, applied in conjunction with the principles of the Deming Circle. And I'll be turning to the Deming Circle shortly. The architecture of Occupational Safety and Health Management System is that initially the management system of occupational safety and health initially was focused on technical inspections and technical specifications. Of course, later on it has been realized that technical specifications and inspections alone are not enough and are not sufficient to ensure the safety and health of workers. So right now we have inclusion of organizational factors, human factors, and also behavioral issues. And behavioral safety is gaining a lot of prominence in terms of its identification as a key factor, for example, in the causation of occupational accidents. Now, I want to look at the 5 basic characteristics of any occupational safety and health management system that are critical in driving compliance to occupational safety and health requirements in workplaces. Number 1 principle is that in terms of functions, the occupational safety and health management system is supposed to increase the effectiveness of occupational safety and health management. Number 2, it is supposed to guarantee compliance with existing legislation and other requirements. And number 3, it's supposed to improve occupational safety and health performance. And as I said earlier, with respect to the Deming Circle, there is continuous improvement as part and parcel of the development of occupational safety and health within the workplaces. And in this kind of system, the occupational safety and health objectives management systems are to be defined by the organization. And they could include ethical issues, economic, legal, organizational issues. And that is why not all occupational safety and health management systems have the same objectives. Some develop or decide on annual development objectives. Some have a long-term or a short-term objectives, and these are implemented within annual systems. And number 2, basic characteristic of an occupational safety and health management system is a form of a holistic approach. And this one specifies and requires implementation of a series of elements, and of course with positive interactions between them. There is training, for example. Training is approached holistically in terms of the training requirements and also as part and parcel of the production process itself. So training becomes holistic in terms of approach. Now, the third characteristic is that the OSH MS system has provisions for system maintenance and continuity. And this is evaluated on a regular basis. It is through an ongoing basis. And this is where we have safety and health audits, fire safety audits, and periodic review of its objectives and effectiveness is necessary to ensure continuous improvement. So the bedrock of occupational safety and health management system is to ensure that there is provision for continuous improvement. And in terms of OSH performance, as a fourth characteristic, these are important to the evaluation of the management system. And in this particular performance measurements, there are lagging measurements and leading measurements. So for example, leading measurements would include training, number of trainings done, different types of trainings done, risk assessments, those kind of things, actions taken. And of course, lagging would include things like number of accidents and so on. So these four characteristics are important in terms of defining the occupational safety and health management system. The next question I want us to ask ourselves is the issue of how does an occupational safety and health management system relates with regulatory requirements. And one of the things that is very, very exciting in terms of legal development around the world is that regulatory requirements now include a systematic management approach to control occupational safety and health hazards. And I must mention at the onset that there are two types of regulatory regimes. One is highly prescriptive, indicating what the organization has to do, while others give the basic skeleton and they require the organization to identify what they need to do or what they have to do in order to comply with that regulatory requirement. Kenya seems to have a blend of those two, and many countries also do have the same kind of blend. But it is important to note that a prescriptive system and highly prescriptive system and a skeleton system both lead to the control of occupational safety and health hazards in different ways. I want to look at the example of the European Framework Directive on Safety and Health at Work of Directive 89/391 EEC. This was adopted in 1989, and it had a substantial milestone, of course, in improving safety and health at work. One of the things that was was defined in this directive was the work environment. And this was in accordance with the ILO Convention 11155. And it defines a modern approach of taking into account the technical safety as well as general prevention of ill health at the workplace. To help organizations and countries understand the directive better, in 2004, the European Commission issued another communication, and this one was on the practical implementation of the provisions of the same directives, trying to make workplaces understand the framework directive itself, and the workplaces, the work equipment, the personal protective equipment, and handling of manual loads, and of course, display screen equipment. So we find that there is a general framework directive, and it is followed by a detailed implementation framework, which gives provisions on exactly how to comply with the directive. In Kenya, we have the Factories and Other Places of Work Act, Safety and Health Committee rules. And if you look at the rules clearly, you'll find that these rules define what exactly a safety and health committee should look like in terms of formation, in terms of membership, in terms of what it is required to undertake within the workplace to improve occupational safety and health. So this is a very good example of how occupational safety and health management systems and regulatory requirements are related. Now, the second relationship is that the OSH management systems require a range of elements to be put in place, like a management system. That is, how will the occupational safety and health management system be deployed within the workplace? And who will be involved? How will it be managed? So there's a management structure to lead the process of the occupational safety and health management system. And it involves workers, it conducts risk assessments, and of course, it also develops occupational safety and health competence within the workplace. Now, the other relationship is the issue of having sector-specific management system in place. After the Seveso disaster, of course, there were developed in Europe what we call sector-specific safety management systems for the chemical process industries, especially those that deal with major hazards. In Kenya, we have the Building Operations and Works of Engineering Construction Rules of 1984. And these rules are extremely prescriptive in terms of what the workplaces are required to undertake in construction environments, and how systems for occupational safety and health are supposed to be installed, implemented, and of course regularly monitored. Excuse me. Then we have the hazardous substances rules, which are also very prescriptive. And if you look at the Occupational Safety and Health Act, provisions on chemical safety are extremely prescriptive. They even require workplaces to ensure that they have material safety data sheets, require training records to be developed for chemical safety, and so on. So these are very clear relationships between the occupational safety and health management systems and the regulatory regimes. Now, one of the things that has been noted is that there is wide government support for occupational safety and health management systems. If you look at legislation that is found in Kenya, for example, if you look at the national policy for occupational safety and health, there is extreme support, for occupational safety and health management systems. And even the law, the Safety and Health Committee rules require that a kind of occupational safety and health management system be established in a workplace to ensure that hazards can be managed on an ongoing basis. Now, in UK, for example, there is promotion of voluntary management systems. In Denmark, we have exemptions from regular screening inspections. And in Kenya, of course, in the US, we have occupational safety and health management systems that are embedded in the Occupational Safety and Health Administration's Voluntary Protection Program of the US. So these are government support around the world that confirm that these kind of systems support regulatory compliance, and therefore there is government support for those kind of occupational safety and health management systems. The other aspect I want to touch just briefly is on the issue of standardization. And standardization, we have ISO 45001, and we have also the OSH, Occupational Safety and Health Management System Guidelines by the ILO of 2001. These standards tend to guide organizations towards compliance, of course, with the regulatory requirements in the workplace. Now, this is a guide checklist for ISO 45001 audit, and this gives organizations also an opportunity to audit themselves so that they are able to identify gaps within the organization and also gaps with compliance with these international standards. And this is a new standard, of course, for us in the occupational safety and health arena. You know about it. Then I would like to look at briefly the issue and the role of the the dimming cycle, the one that I mentioned earlier, as a tool for implementation of occupational safety and health management systems. This is not a legal requirement. However, it is critical in the success of implementing an occupational safety and health management system. We have the plan, do, check, and act. And in terms of planning, there are several decisions that needs to be made. For example, on the aims of planning, and of course the elements within the planning aspect. For example, there is need to develop a policy. These are requirements for many workplaces. There's need to conduct, to have top management involvement, need to identify hazards, to conduct risk assessments, determine controls, and of course, rely and look for the legal and other requirements. And of course, in the planning stage, we also develop the objectives and programs to be implemented, either on a short-term or an annual basis or on a long-term basis. Now, these decisions that are required with respect to policy development is that what are the areas that the policy must cover. And of course, there will be technical expertise required for some workplaces to develop these kind of policies. So decisions have to be made on exactly what type of policies need to be put in place, what type of risk assessments that need to be conducted, and what type of controls need to be put in place. And of course, the legal requirements associated with every particular kind of aspect. And in the do, you have to identify how to implement the process. If it is communicating the policy, training for competency within the organization, the operational control activities, emergency preparedness and response activities, including drills and so on. All these require some development of competence within the organization to be able to deliver on the elements of the occupational safety and health management system. And of course, the checking bit, there are internal checks and there are also external checks. The organization needs to identify, for example, who is going to do safety and health audits, who is going to do fire safety audits for the organization, and how will it be done, and what will be, how will the organization deal with the non-conformities, or what are the corrective actions, and what are the timelines for ensuring that these things are put in place in time. And of course, there is also the act bit, and this is where people take actions within the organizations to continually improve the occupational safety and health performance. And it is quite interesting that the implementation of this dimming cycle will lead to what is called continuous improvement, because on a regular basis, once you identify the actions that needs to be improved, these are taken into the plan of the organization, and then the following steps, the steps are recurred on an annual or regular basis to ensure that any identified gap is addressed on a continuous basis. So back to our questions that we started with in this presentation. Number one was what is the role and significance of regulatory compliance in the promotion of worker safety and health? The second question was, does regulatory requirements impact on OSH decision making? And number four was, what is the relationship between regulatory requirements and compliance? The final question was, are regulatory requirements sustainable in creating safe workplaces and promoting the health of workers? From this presentation, I want us to look at how regulatory requirements drive compliance. Now, our regulatory requirements drive decision making. They tell the organization what needs to be done. And the organization now, therefore, following the 7-step approach that we have talked about earlier, they identify which activities they can undertake to comply or to enable the organization comply with the regulatory requirements. And once decisions have been made and actions are taken in accordance with the 7-step approach of decision making, there is compliance achieved. But now the question is, the conclusion is regulatory requirements drive compliance through strategic decision-making processes. So we achieve compliance to regulatory requirements by looking at decisions based on what we understand from the regulatory requirements. So my last question is, are regulatory requirements sufficient to improve occupational safety and health? And this is a question that I want to leave with you, and you ponder about the answers. And once you get the answers, you will be able to improve workplace conditions in your workplace. Thank you very much. I want to conclude my presentation with those few or many remarks. Thank you so much. God bless you. Back to Imran.
Yeah, I'll take over. Thank you very much, Dr. Muruka, for the concise presentation on what compliance is and what regulatory requirements and how regulatory requirements drive decision making. The important issue is on decision making, because that's where everything happens. That's where we can say the occupational safety and health comes into activity. So for everybody, if you have a question, you can put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand and unmute yourself, and then you speak when we mention your name. I cannot see any questions at the moment in the chat box, but I have a question which I want to put to you, Dr. Muruka, and it goes with what you've discussed right now in a way. I'm thinking in a situation where the safety officer sees a problem of not fulfilling requirements and not complying with the regulations, but the part of decision making is normally in the management. And when the safety officer, who may be or may not be part of the management, may not have the necessary contingencies to push forward what is the correct decision to be made, and maybe may take some decisions that which are not very favorable with the management. So are there systems within DOSH which ensure that such a safety officer, for the first, is protected against harassment from the management? Because when you start coming up with issues that management don't like, you get harassed. So first, protection, and then to support this officer to ensure that the decision-making process goes in the right way.
Thank you, Abdul Kadir, for that very precise question. This has been a challenge in many organizations. I must admit that I worked in a place which is highly civilized, so these kind of issues did not arise. One of the most important things that a safety officer has to note is that a safety officer is practicing advocacy. He is an advocate of occupational safety and health services. Safety officer is also a lobbyist. He has to lobby for best practices. And of course, when you lobby for best practices, you can get better practices or good practices in the process. But both those two things are not easy to implement. Advocacy and lobbying are not easy to implement, especially if you are in a lower decision-making level within the organization. And that is why, if you look at the Safety and Health Committee rules, the Secretary of the Occupational Safety and Health Committee is supposed to be a senior management representative. So any safety officer appointed in any organization should be a senior management representative. That means that they have direct access to the CEO or to the top levels of management, and they are able to access these without any problem. Where I worked, there were two people who had access to top management without any hindrance, and that was the health and safety manager and the security manager. And if that happens, these in terms of the organizational structure, it is easier for the organization to implement some of these decisions with ease. Now, how does the Directorate support safety officers? Of course, we don't have a system at the moment entrenched either in law or otherwise, but individual safety officers have really assisted safety officers in the country and safety managers to implement and to ensure that certain decisions are taken in line with the Occupational Safety and Health Act and in line with. So, and that's why I said at the beginning that a safety officer is a lobbyist and a safety officer is an advocate. He has to have the skills to make these communications efficient for his or her success. Otherwise, it will be quite difficult for a safety officer in an organization to implement certain decisions. So if they don't have access to the top, then they must have the skills to lobby their immediate supervisors and convince them that safety and health should take agenda number one in the entire decision-making process. And I think safety first agenda can drive that process, and he has to lobby the entire organization against the safety first. Thank you so much. I think I have answered you Abdul Kadir.
Yes, and now we have questions from the other participants. Thanks for the great presentation. My main concern is the informal sector in our country, Cali sector. We've a lot of challenges there. I'm just curious to know if DOSH has any progress in that sector.
Thank you, Abdul Kadir, for this question. DOSH has, since about 10 years ago, we have launched a program for the improving occupational safety and health in the Cali sector. We will run that program this year also. It's an annual program that we intend to ensure that it becomes continuous in the long term. And this is an area that we have keen interest. We know that between up to 90% of enterprises are actually small enterprises, of course, falling within the definition of the Cali sector. So DOSH, yes, DOSH is having an interest in the Cali sector, and it might not be as huge as it should be, but we are targeting the entire sector in our response. Thank you.
But how do you see that organized? Because the Cali sector is very spread. It's the most challenging. It's very wide. How do you see organization of following up the Cali sector will be done by DOSH?
Well, we work very closely with another government authority, that is the Micro and Small Enterprises Authority. That is a semi-autonomous government agency, the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection. And that the work of that authority is to organize the Juakali sector. So we reach the Juakali sector through that authority. And it is actually a very efficient system for reaching the Juakali sector.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question. What is the Directorate's strategy in reviewing the current statutory and regulatory requirement with emerging changes in the health and safety sector, H&S sector? I assume it's health and safety sector.
Okay, thank you. Now, these regulatory reforms are a continuous process. Maybe you are carrying a pan. What is Beryl doing? That is very threatening, Beryl. Now, just be patient, Beryl. Eh? Leave your knives, keep your knives away. Now, as I was saying, regulatory reforms are a continuous process within the country, and the reforms in the laws started a long time ago. We are many years into these kind of reforms. There have been several suggestions on how to reform the laws, and I can say that we have completed the process of public participation, stakeholder participation, and therefore we expect in the near future that these laws could be presented in Parliament. Of course, they have been looked at by all stakeholders, the Federation of Kenya Employers, Go to Kenya, and all these stakeholders are in direct agreement with the reforms that we have put in place so far. Of course, we have looked at reforms in the oil and gas sector. We have regulations. We are also waiting for their publishing. We also have suggestions and reforms in the work injury benefits administration. And in that particular area, we also have some suggestions. In the area of occupational diseases, we have some suggestions on that. And they are, of course, I would say at an advanced stage. Of course, there are certain aspects that we have no control over, particularly legislation itself, that remains the work of Parliament. So once we have completed our suggestions and proposals and put them together, now the rest goes to Parliament. And I'm sure that is where we are going next. I don't know how long that will take, but that is a process that is already ongoing.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everybody.
The next question is, this is a very detailed presentation, Dr. So I'm grateful. Does DOSH have a guidance? Does DOSH have a guideline for safety performance analysis, especially for the ever dynamic retail industry?
We don't have, as DOSH, we don't have that kind of OSH performance measurement system. But if you look very keenly at the approved persons and approved institutions, if you look at the safety and health audits, the fire safety audits, and so on, these actually measure OSH performance in details. And this is a system that we have put in place to ensure that we are able to monitor, for example, training that take place in workplaces, accidents, of course, in workplaces. We have a system for reporting, and we have a system for auditing the workplaces. So these systems are actually working. What may not be well in terms of reach is that we have not reached the 50% mark, or even 40% of the number of workplaces. And this, I think the DOSH is actually addressing this matter on a regular basis. Thank you.
Okay, then the next question. The presentation is very perfect. Now, one question. This question is a little bit outside the topic of discussion, but we can answer it very briefly. Is it possible to review the qualifications of the safety officers, safety trainers, instructors in Kenya? Why is it mandatory to have a Bachelor of Science in Environment? Can't you consider psychologists too and other types of bachelor degrees? I don't know if you can answer this, but it's outside the topic. But if you can answer it very briefly.
I think the person is concerned about our approval process, especially with respect to safety and health advisors. I personally do agree that there is need for reforms also in that particular area. And when the time comes, we will be engaging the stakeholders in the areas that need those particular kind of reforms. So yes, there is need for us to improve. And yes, we have a plan to engage at the right time. Thank you.
Okay, another good question on your Cali. Good presentation, Dr. Muruka. Your Cali sector is employing almost over 80% of the Kenyan's workforce. What is DOSH doing towards enforcement in this sector? Since the sector presents many risks of its employees, now it's an issue of enforcement.
Thank you so much. That must be Dr. Wino's question.
Yes, that's Dr. Wino.
Oh my God. Let me clarify that in terms of enforcement, and enforcement does not necessarily mean only going to the Jokali sector and taking people to court. By the way, if we did that, that will be the only work that we will be doing the rest of our lives. So what have we done for Jokali sector? There is a tool that we have in the legislation, and that is training. And as I've said before, we have implemented a systematic training program for improving occupational safety and health in the Jokali sector. And that is an ongoing program. So I would say that, yes, the regulatory authority has many tools to deploy to ensure and for compliance. We have started with the training, which is a good way to ensure that we are able to build capacity for those particular small enterprises to ensure safety on their own. Thank you, Abdul Kadir.
Yeah, just another question. What do you think the employer, not employers, but workers' organization? How could workers' organization contribute in ensuring improvement of safety of workers? Is there anything they can do? Do you have, as DOSH, do you have any cooperation with the workers' unions, for example?
Thank you so much. Wow. Let me start with employer organizations. We have very close working relationship with the Federation of Kenya Employers. And on a regular basis, DOSH and FKE cooperate on improving occupational safety and health in various enterprises. With respect to COTU Kenya, of course, as one of the employer organization, employee representative organizations, we also have a relationship with COTU, and on a regular basis, COTU consults on areas that needs intervention by the Directorate. And wherever we are alerted, we will be able to respond appropriately to improve occupational safety and health services in those specific sectors.
There's a question from Beryl here about compensation, but I think such specific, very specific questions, specific to a specific issue, are not what we talk about. We cannot solve problems of specific nature, because I think there are many factors which you have to be considered, because it's asking about doctor being biased. So I'll jump over that question because it's very specific in my opinion. But the next, there are interested OSH practitioners who are interested in conducting academic private professional research for continual improvement of OSH management in Kenya. What framework does OSH have to assist to facilitate research work? That's the question from Daniel Wameo.
Abdul Kadir, kindly repeat the question. You are not stable.
Oh, yeah. There are interested OSH practitioners who are interested in conducting academic or private professional research for continual improvement of OSH management in Kenya. What framework does OSH have to assist or facilitate such research work?
That is great. We at the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, we have a framework of collaborating with individuals and companies to address specific research questions. And this year, we have already identified a research question, and we have already identified an individual, and we are going to work with that individual for the next 1 year to develop that proposal, conduct the research, and publish. So we have just started this form of collaboration within the country, and we hope that we are able to expand this based on the resourcing to other colleagues around the world in future.
Okay, there's a question from Gladys. When it comes to compensation for accidents, and some companies have been highlighted in the media to have made it difficult for the employees injured to be compensated. Some lack resources to pursue the matters in the courts. What has DOSH done as intervention to this, where compensation is it's not forthcoming?
Thank you very much. One of the things that DOSH has put in place is we have a dedicated officer responsible for work injury benefits administration. And under that officer, we have dedicated officers also working there around the clock to deal with specific issues. And I would be glad if any complainant approaches the Directorate, and we will be able to assign an officer to investigate, because I think the problem is whether the matter has been properly investigated and whether the matter is compensable or not, and whether, for example, the award is appropriate. So we have a system for addressing all types of complaints arising from the compensation administration system within the country. So I would urge any particular affected parties to report directly, write a letter to the Director of Occupational Safety and Health Services, and the matter will be thoroughly investigated. And of course, there will be a solution. Thank you.
Okay, one final question, and we put a full stop there. If there are additional questions, we can please send them to admin@oshproservices.org, and we can forward the questions. We had one question which is on construction site, but I'll put it in a more general way on general non-compliances. We know there are many places which don't comply and do not fulfill the regulatory requirements. What does DOSH do?
We tell them to comply. The most important approach that we have on a regular basis is to inspect workplaces. And as you know, we cannot inspect all the workplaces in a year. Even in the US, you will find an inspector coming to your workplace after 6 years or 7 years. So it's because the inspectors are not enough. Where there are specific issues that the director needs to address, the only thing that is required is information. If we have documentary evidence that a specific workplace requires our intervention, we have moved with speed to address those particular complaints. We don't even take a day. Once we get a complaint of a nature that requires immediate action, we take immediate action. And as you know, we have different types of instruments to do this. We can issue an improvement notice, in which case we give them a number of days to ensure that they take corrective action. Number two, if the situation warrants and there is imminent danger, we can issue a prohibition notice. And we can also take the matter to court if these two instruments are not properly working. If the person is very cooperative and wants to improve, we provide training services to ensure that they are able to improve finally on their own accord. Thank you.
I have, I said we've taken the last question, but I have a personal issue which I've always wanted to ask and it's about taking people to court. How fast are the court system when a case is taken to court? How fast before the decision is made? Is it instant? Is it after a day, after a month? How fast does it take?
This is a very interesting question, Abdul Kadir. Of course, you are a Kenyan also, so you must be understanding the Kenyan court system. The Kenyan court system is based on the British system, but it also follows some systems that are blended on the American system. So this blending alone ensures that the cases that are brought before magistrates are not expedited as required. So many cases take long periods of time to be resolved. And this is normal in Kenya with cases anyway, not only occupational safety and health cases. In the National Policy for Occupational Safety and Health 2012, there were proposals in the policy to have special courts for occupational safety and health. But this has not materialized since 2012. We don't know whether special courts would be the best way to go because even in terms of employment, you see employment courts are working and now better expediting cases. We hope that if there is a special court for occupational safety and health issues, that would be able to expedite court decisions. As at now, we must rely on the existing magistrates court, subordinate court system to deploy these things. And of course, with the enlarged, legal regime, people can still go up to the Supreme Court. And of course, you know how long it takes to reach the Supreme Court from the subordinate courts. Thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful answer. And I think we will put a full stop there. I've put our email address in the chat box. If you have any questions you want to ask the doctor, you can send them to us and we will forward them. And I'm sure he will be glad to answer these questions in written, and we can forward the answer back to you once we've got the answers. And if you send questions, I'll make sure Dr. Muruka answers them. I'll follow them personally and make sure they answer them. So thank you very much for that presentation. Thank you very much for all the participants and the questions and the engagement. I like it very much. I want to tell you about the next workshop, which will be on 31st, Monday 31st of this month, August. And the focus will be on mental health. This is one issue which is problematic, and it's very easily forgotten. So we've invited a clinical psychologist who will share with us her experiences with working with people who working with people who have been harassed at workplaces and bullying at workplaces, what mental conditions they end up having. So the next topic will be on mental health, and that is on 31st of August. At the same time, information will be sent out in the channels we've always used to send out information. And we hope to see you, many of you, again in this coming important webinar on 31st of August. Dr. Muruka, thank you for your time. Thank you for spending a little bit of an hour with us. Very informative, very enlightening, and we hope that we take the good guidelines we got today about decision making and how regulatory requirements drive the decision making in the workplaces, and we make the right decisions for the safety of the workers. So if we don't have many thanks coming in for you, Dr. Muruka. So without taking much more time, we'll close this meeting, and we hope to see you again in the next webinar. By the way, Dr. Muruka, is it okay that we put your presentation on our webpage for all others to access it?
Yes, I will make it available.
Okay, send it to us, and then we'll put it on together with the recording of this presentation. Will be put on the webpage, and yeah, you can review it, look at it again, listen to it again, and share it with your friends so that the benefit is spread across the country. Thank you very much to you all, and have a nice evening, and hope to see you again next time.
Thank you.
Okay. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.